Hello, welcome to Geeking Out with Shad. Today I'm going to talk about a hot topic. That topic is global oil supply. Yes. Yeah, there your head just blew up. I'm going to try to keep this as non political as possible because it shouldn't really be a political topic. It's kind of crazy that we politicize this issue. So part of the reason why I'm thinking about this and wanting to do a video on it is just because OPEC just recently reduced the um, production of oil, and so that's going to cause gas prices to go up. It's going to it went against what our government, the U.S. government, wanted and things like that. So um, we we are reliant on oil, and that's kind of an issue. And now, when we talk about global oil supply, there's another thing we need to talk about, and that's a thing called peak oil. Peak oil was a hot topic around the 2000s, early 2000s, and then it kind of went away. I feel like the oil industry doesn't like this topic coming up for good reason because they have a lot to lose if people start to get away from oil. Um, but now we kind of have no choice because peak oil happened, and here's a chart you can look at right around 2015, 2016, roughly. And people will debate that, but this is data that's coming from BP, British Petroleum, one of the bigger oil companies out there. So this peak oil thing, with what it really means is when our demand hits a point where supply isn't keeping up with it anymore, and then the supply starts to drop and our demand keeps increasing. Of course, as supply drops, demand is going to get forced down because there just won't be oil to always keep up with the demand. But when that starts to happen, then that's when costs start to go up, when oil prices are going to start to go up and things like that. And so even though OPEC, reduces production, that's reducing supply, and when our demand is up here, that makes prices go up. So that's the whole supply and demand thing. We'll leave that to the economists to talk about, but when there's low supply, high demand, prices go up. So since we're past peak oil, and oil is going to just be a forever declining resource, it is a finite resource. It always has been, but now we're starting to see, like, well, how much is there left? Well, BP says there's about 50 years of oil left in the world, global oil supply, if we keep using it at the current consumption rate that we're using it. So that's kind of a big issue. So are gas prices going to come down? Are they ever going to get really cheap again? I'm going to guess that yes, they probably will have a couple of times when they drop down. But for the most part, on average, they're going to just keep going up. So I've been talking a lot about EVs lately, and the auto industry is all about transitioning to EVs. If you think for a moment that they're moving to EVs because they care about the environment, wrong, wrong, wrong. The auto industry has never cared about the environment. They care about money, profit, selling as many vehicles, and the more higher profit they can make on a vehicle sale, the better for them, right? But now they're being forced, just because of realistic circumstances, to move to EVs. And so the reason I say they've never cared about the environment is, if you go back in the late 80s, early 90s, the most common cars being made, the most popular cars, were small cars, small medium-sized cars that got, easily upper 20s. A lot of them got into the 30 miles per gallon range, and those were like the Civics, the Accords, the Corollas, things like that. The American cars were like, what was it, the Escort at the time, then later the Focus. Chevrolet had what, the Cavalier. Ugh, I hate to think about that car. And then of course the Cobalt, things like that. Those were like the vehicles they were really pushing to sell. That were decent cars for good fuel economy. Oh, Saturn! I completely forgot about Saturn. Yeah, that was a company that made pretty good fuel economy cars. They went away from that in the 2000s, and I think of the Excursion when I think about 2000s. I think of the Hummer H2, things like that. But like we shifted away from this economy car thing and went into this SUV pickup truck thing, whatever. And today the most popular selling vehicles are the number one selling vehicle is the Ford F-150 full size pickup truck. They get 16 to 18 miles per gallon in the city, maybe 20 to 22 or 23 on the highway. Way less MPG than an economy car. And this is what everybody wants to buy. And they want to buy these bigger SUVs, Suburbans, and things like that. And then you have the economy car of today is like a medium sized SUV, which still gets way less fuel economy than, say, a small car. So think of like a RAV4, things like that. Only recently, within the last few years, that we started to see more hybrids of these vehicles come out, things like that, and we start to see a kind of a push towards making them more fuel efficient, but only like literally within the last 3 to 4 years have we started to see that, with the exceptions of like the RAV4 or whatever hybrid, which has been out for a while. But yeah, we definitely moved away from that, and the auto industry cares about profit. Like these like large SUVs and full size pickup trucks are low technology vehicles. There's not a whole lot of technology. They use big displacement V8s in them to get power. They use although I do have to give Ford credit for the what do they call them, the I don't even remember their V6 turbo motors, but anyway, they're still not all that fuel efficient. So if we look at that body on frame, things like that, the reason why manufacturers love selling these things and why they push them so much is because they make high amounts of money. They don't do that much research and development on them. They don't have to engineer and come out with new things. They just market a new tailgate or something like that, or make it bigger. Like making it bigger is always their push, right? Like it's just crazy. So anyway, I'll get off of that soapbox, but the auto industry does not care about the environment, but now they're being forced to realize that they need to get away from internal combustion engines, also known as ICE vehicles. If you see that term, ICE vehicle, it stands for internal combustion vehicle, versus EV vehicle, electric vehicle. Well, EV vehicle is kind of redundant, right? EV, that's like saying ATM machine, right? Or PIN number. Anyway, crack me up. I see that all the time. So the industry has kind of been pushed, and Tesla's the culprit there. I believe, if you think about Tesla, Elon Musk's company, he made the world realize that EVs are possible. They are a viable solution, and it can be done, and they can be nice, and they actually outperform ICE vehicles, and they drive better, all that stuff. He proved that, so the auto industry is like, whoa, we need to play catch up or we're going to get left behind. And so now you have these startups coming up. I saw a Lucid Motors car the other day. I'm like, who's Lucid? Well, that's a startup company, and they're selling cars. And companies like Rivian and stuff like that, just completely out of nowhere, some startup company is now, people love those things. They're more viable. So the big auto industry, companies, General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, which is now some European company, Stellantis or something. They own like tons of companies. So Chrysler, Ram, Jeeps, all of those aren't even American company anymore. Um, and then you have the Toyotas and the Hondas and all those. So all those big companies are realizing they need to do EVs. Well, why do they need to do EVs? Well, because we have a finite resource and oil is going to only get more expensive. If they don't start moving to EVs, people, consumers, us, aren't going to be able to afford to drive them soon. We already saw this past summer gas prices spike around my area almost $5 a gallon, which is really high for this area. But in like California, almost $7, somewhere around there. They're all over. That's a lot of money per gallon. In the lower MPG vehicle you have, way more expensive that is for you. Higher MPG cars don't get as affected. If you're driving a Prius and oil prices spike, it's not going to hurt your pocketbook that much. But if you're driving a Ford F-150 and they spike, you're easily putting $100 or more into a tank of gas that lasts you maybe 300 miles, 300 some miles, right? So, and these trucks that do all the towing and have massive tanks so they can tow massive trailers and stuff, they're hurting even more, right? As far as how much they cost to drive. And that's just going to become a thing. Like, it is going to be more expensive to fuel your car with gasoline as we move forward. Like I said, it's going to kind of be a roller coaster, but if you follow a general curve, it's just going to get more and more expensive to where it's going to be unaffordable. And so consumers won't even be able to afford to drive cars. And the big auto companies know this. So they're getting away from ICE cars, internal combustion engine cars, and moving to EVs. So it makes sense. Like, you want to have a business in the future, you got to move the EVs. I know a lot of people are upset about this. They love their Hemis, they love their pushrod V8s, all that stuff. But, you know, that's a dying technology. It's older technology. As cool as it is, trust me, I owned a Camaro. I loved it. It was a fun car to drive. I loved the sound it made. I loved all that stuff. But it's an older technology that's going away, and we just have to accept that. I know some people can't. They just, for some reason, they don't understand progress. You know, it's like somebody's sitting there and arguing that they can't use their old cassette player and cassette tape. Why aren't you releasing music on cassettes anymore? I just don't get it, right? Like, that's these people are in that category, right? We're moving to EVs, and the reason why is because oil is going to just infinitely become more expensive. It's going to be harder to get. So right now, global oil consumption is at 94.1 million barrels a day. That's a 2021 statistics. From BP, I believe, has that statistics. BP says oil's going to last us about 50 more years at our current consumption levels. So unless we start lowering that consumption rate, it's just going to become a more finite resource much faster. And right now, over the last 20 years, the demand for oil keeps growing. It hasn't been shrinking. So we need to change that curve and start shrinking the demand so we can make oil last longer. That's the whole idea, right? So one of the reasons why it's going to get more expensive is because it's getting harder to find oil and to extract it. You know, if you take just drilling for oil and just getting it out of the ground directly, that's the least expensive way. But now they're doing fracking, and they're trying to find out other techniques that are much more expensive to get oil, like between shale and things like that. That's expensive, and there's a breaking point for a company when the cost to get the oil, it exceeds what they can sell it for, or their profits margins shrink. They're just going to be like, this isn't worth it for us to do. And so they're not very far from getting there. So a couple of years ago, a bunch of oil companies went bankrupt, smaller ones, but they went bankrupt because it's just getting too expensive to get oil for a lot of them. And so as much as we want to talk about climate change and global warming, and that's another reason to get off of, fossil fuels, as we like to call them, we also just have no choice because we're just not going to have the resource available. So there's two main reasons why to do it. So if you don't believe in climate change and all that stuff, it doesn't matter. We're still going to run out of this resource. It's just going to get too expensive to keep using it. And my thinking on this is, why are we wasting it to transport ourselves when we don't have to, when we have another solution, electricity? And yes, some of electricity is generated from fossil fuels, but we're working hard and strong to make that less and less of a case, to come up with more renewable energy. And we can each do our part, at least those of us that can afford it. I did a video on the solar panels that we have on this house. So we can individually contribute and do it too. And it saves us money in the long run anyway, so why not? So yes, this is the reason why we're moving to EVs. It has little to nothing to do with the environment. I do believe we need to fix the environment problem, because we need to be able to breathe. We need to have a clean planet, and to keep functioning. We've already started to see some pretty negative side effects of climate change. But there's a whole bunch of people out there that either they believe that we're not the one contributing to climate change, or they just believe it doesn't exist. And then if they're also going to believe that we're not going to run out of this finite resource soon, then I don't know what to tell you. Then you're probably the type of people that politicize this thing, when it's really not a politicized thing, or a thing that should be politicized. It is a politicized thing because people make it politicized, but it's really shouldn't be. Facts are facts. Science is science. So there you have it. If you like this kind of content or my other content, please hit that subscribe button. And then on my individual videos, if you hit the like button, that lets me know that you liked that video after you watched it. Hitting subscribe does get my videos in your feed if you like the content. That's why you hit subscribe on YouTube. So that goes for all YouTube stuff. If you're watching YouTube and you want to see that person's content, hit their subscribe button. It helps them, but it also helps you see what you want customized in your feed. Cool. Peace.